Webinar is titled Yes They Can, Rigorous Writing Tasks for Low-Level ESL with Mary Louise Bias of American Institute for Research, which is a AEBG TAP partner. So just to go over a couple of housekeeping items before we get started, if you have speakers on or a headset, there's no need to call in. If you can't hear, click on the speaker icon on top, on your top left hand of your screen. Change it from white to green, and this will project sound for you. If that does not work, please be sure to let us know via the chat pod that you're still experiencing technical difficulties. Another quick fix is if you just log out of Adobe Connect and come back in. That should help you as well. But like I said, we are available to assist you if you need it. Some menu functions that are available for you. At the top right hand of your screen, you will find communications menu. This menu will allow you to communicate with the presenter as she moves along through today's presentation. Some of the options that you have are raise your hand, agree, disagree, you're stepping away, you need the presenter to speak louder, speak softer, speed up, slow down if you're laughing or applauding. That's something that's being said throughout the webinar. So please be sure to use those. And then also the presenter may prompt you to use the sound icons, the communication menu whenever it's applicable. And the icon will appear beside your name in the attendee list. So that's our way of knowing that you're trying to communicate with us. The chat pod, which everyone has used, thank you very much. That's your way of communicating with us throughout the webinar, so please be sure to use that. And if you're experiencing any technical difficulties, or if you have a question, comment, concern, whatever the case may be, please use the general chat pod and just enter in your text and click the message bubble or hit send, and that will share the message with everyone. And if you're attending with other colleagues, as I stated before, please be sure to let us know in the chat pod who you're attending with by typing their names. We'll be sure to account for everyone in our attendance. And this webinar is being recorded and will be available on the California Adult Education website later on this afternoon. So please be sure to check that out. I'll be sure to type in the URL so that you're able to access the webinar recording and materials at a later time. All right, and those all I have for technical assistance. I'll be sure to help everyone via the chat pod. And now I will turn it over to Mary Louise. Mary Louise?
Welcome, and thank you for joining us this afternoon, everyone. I am in the Sacramento American Institutes for Research office, and it's a warm fall day here. I thank you all for joining this webinar right after lunch for many of you, or many of you may be having your lunch at the same time after a busy morning of teaching. Why don't we try the raise your hand icon? And how many of you were ever nervous the first time you started teaching writing for ESL? Seems like it's kind of unanimous there. Quite a few of you were. And I was too. Since my graduate course in teaching ESL writing, I've been passionate about incorporating writing in my ESL classes, especially from the lowest levels. However, when I started my career, writing was not always taught at these levels, and in many cases it wasn't taught because it wasn't even part of the curriculum or the textbook that we were using. And I remember intermediate teachers coming to me when I was a program director and saying, Mary Louise, you've got to do something about writing for those low-level teachers. When they get to us, they can't even write a paragraph, let alone a really well-constructed sentence. But I think now, since standard-based education has been at the center of adult education, writing can no longer wait. And I think many of you are already incorporating writing into what you're doing. But I want to know a little bit more about you, so I want you to go ahead and click on which level you're currently teaching. And I understand that some of you may be teaching a multi-level class, so just click on whichever bubble represents you. Okay, so go ahead and I don't have everyone responding, but almost everyone. So I'm going to close the poll in just 1 second. So the majority of you today are with low beginning students. And then followed by, we have a good amount of multi-level teachers as well. So some of you who are low beginning may also fit into that multi-level group, and administrators too. So in today's session, I would like us to look at how the educational shifts brought to the fore with the college and career readiness standards serve as the foundation for rigorous writing tasks from the lower ESL levels. We will look at 5 different tasks, followed by an analysis of which English language proficiency standards are addressed. And here's another opportunity for you to raise your hands. How many of you have had an opportunity to look at the English language proficiency standards? Okay, a few of you have. These came out in the fall of 2016. And as I mentioned to Veronica, oh, good. So it looks like a good amount of you have already had an opportunity to look at those. But I will also, we will post those on the website after this webinar. So for those of you who haven't looked at them, then you can look at them along with your handout. And one more hand raise. I'd like to find out how many of you had the opportunity to print out your handout and have that ready for today. Hopefully, oh, good, excellent. And if you did not, you'll notice that underneath the agenda to the right, there's a section with resources. And then it says, yes, they can, HO, that's the handout. And you can click on that to download the file if you don't have it already. How do you raise your hand? Up at the top where you have green sound button, audio button, to the right there's a person with their hand raised. The 4th button to the right of audio, that's where you can raise your hand, and you can just click on that downward facing arrow and click on raise hand. Okay. So after we analyze each task, we'll reflect on best practices and make a commitment for this school year to come. So let's go ahead and get started. In our warm-up activity, I would like you to write 2 answers for each of these categories in the chat pod. I will open the chat in just a second, so don't write in the general chat. I will give you an opportunity for you to write that. So, I'd like you to think about tools or scaffolds that you've used to help low-level ESL students write. One of my favorites is to provide them with a model. I'd like you to also think about challenges the low-level students face when writing. Many of them feel daunted. And what do you feel as a teacher? My biggest fear or my biggest challenge is when I get that confused look on the students' faces when it's time to write. And I know that I didn't do enough in my instructions to prepare them for the task. So here you will have 3 places to fill in your answers, and I am going to play some thinking music for you. But what I would like you to do is you will have to move the bar to the left, the little ball on the bar to the left, to lower the volume, because otherwise it could be a little bit loud. If it gets too loud and you can also lower the volume on your speakers as well. Let's get started, and you will fill in 2 answers for each, for the tools and scaffolds you use for low-level students, the challenges those students face, and the teacher challenges. as well. So fill in those 3 pods, and you may start now as soon as you hear the music. There. I think now you can type. I'm sorry. Lots of great tools and scaffolds. Let's see if we get some student challenges. My heart just broke when I read the student challenge of arthritic hands. Nuala's culture that stressed importance of accuracy over fluency for a student challenge. I encountered that many times over the years as well. I noticed a teacher challenge giving enough one-on-one time with students. So I'm going to go ahead and stop you there. We have wonderful responses, and the reason I've had you write them in the chat pods is that that can then be captured and that can be sent to all of you. So you don't have to take all of your notes on your handout if you didn't have time to capture all of these as they were coming through. So I'd like to continue with our objectives for today. Take a moment to read those to yourself. The first one we just covered through our warm-up activity. And we are going to now review the 3 shifts in adult education since the advent of the college and career readiness standards. So why should we be incorporating rigorous writing activities in our low-level classes? The reason is because of these 3 shifts. And one way to overcome teacher barriers is to be aware of these shifts. Most of you are probably aware of the shifts, and I'd like you to raise your hand if you've attended workshops about the college and career readiness standards. Wonderful. Great, so about a third of those in attendance have attended CCRS workshops, and that's wonderful. So how do these shifts really affect writing? The second shift about evidence. For writing, the focus is on analyzing sources and conducting research. and these are described in Writing Standards 7 through 9 of the English Language Proficiency Standards. They require students to answer questions based on their understanding of having read a text or multiple texts, but not entirely relying on prior knowledge or experience. And that's one of the big shifts that we have seen. Finally, the third shift about knowledge, informational texts make up the vast majority of required reading in college and the workplace. For the workplace, just think of your students arriving and learning security or safety measures and going through these handbooks that they receive first days on the job. That's a lot of information to take in. And how do we skim something that is new? So lots of times we're putting ourselves in the place of our students whenever we encounter something new in a new location, a new job, or in a new environment or a new class we take. It's always fun to take a new class every now and then. Last fall, I started taking Zumba classes, and they say that it's a great way to really trick your brain and help it learn something new. Take a new class, learn a new skill as often as you can. So let's look at these three components. What makes up rigorous instruction? According to Sarcella and Zwires, academic language includes the features of English used in higher education. They allow access to meaningful employment and opportunity for professional advancement. They have defined it as the set of words, grammar, and discourse strategies that we use to describe complex ideas, higher order thinking processes, and abstract concepts. So that's one component. The second component of rigorous instruction include language strategies. What do your students need to be able to access complex written and oral text? They require exposure to a variety of text, media, and formats, including charts, graphs, web pages. Even think of how formats change on a web page to the delivery on a cell phone, and what students need to be able to navigate in order to get to the information they need. Students are using both bottom-up strategies, such as decoding words, and top-down strategies that include drawing conclusions or using visual cues. Sometimes those visual cues are given to us from fonts, different font size, use of bold print, including references as well. Drawing on prior knowledge, drawing on assumptions, using context clues, drawing inferences, summarizing and synthesizing and analyzing relationships are some common language strategies successful ESL students use. Finally, the third component of critical thinking involves recognizing and solving problems, analyzing relationships between ideas, evaluating evidence, or applying ideas to new situations. So a way to address this is rigorous instruction. We will reflect on each of the tasks you engage in today. We will look at the academic language and critical thinking skills necessary to successfully complete them. I'd like us to take a moment to think about academic language. And just like rigorous instruction has three components, so does academic language. Many times we think only of teaching academic words. However, for students to gain access to higher education and job opportunities, fixed phrases or language chunks can also be taught. How many of you are familiar with the academic word list? You can raise your hand for this. The academic word list was created by Avril Coxhead as part of her doctoral dissertation. And I had the privilege of listening to her speak at a TESOL conference and really thinking that the academic word list is a start. And we have to go beyond just words. And she reminded us to think beyond just the word. So when we think of these fixed phrases, we need to expose our students to them. A great way to do this is by using the sentence frames, and some of you mentioned those as scaffolds that you use, and teaching them explicitly to our students, posting them on the board or on a wall. This way we increase our students' exposure to them. Paul Nation, a linguist, found that for words or phrases to enter our passive vocabulary used for receptive skills, the receptive skills of reading and writing, students need to be exposed to them 15 times. But what is an exposure? An exposure is reading the new word, hearing the teacher say the new word, saying the new word or phrase to a partner, reading it again. So every time a student has to read that phrase or that sentence starter on your poster, that's another exposure, and that's adding up to the 15. So that enters their passive vocabulary. But how do we get it to move from passive to active? Well, in order for it to enter their active vocabulary that we use for our productive skills of speaking and writing, students need to be exposed to them 60 to 65 times. Imagine, so we need to have as many opportunities as possible.
Mary Louise,
Yes,
you
I
had
had some
to,
questions.
yes. So Blanca asks, where would you find that? And I believe she was referring to the
Avril Coxhead, the academic word list.
correct.
Okay, so I will also provide that as a resource. Okay, I've made note of that. Great. My pleasure, Blanca. Okay, so finally, the third part of academic language looks at language holistically through discourse or text structure. So that's when we look up above, thinking, for example, that for our students who are pursuing work in the sciences, they are going to encounter a high use of the passive voice. So that's the text structure that's used. Also, we can think of text structure as description. We can also think of text structure as manuals. Many times manuals that give us instructions use bullet points, and they may not be using a complete sentence, yet students have been taught about reading complete sentences, and might be a bit baffled by a different type of language that they are reading in their manual. So here's an example from Donna Price from San Diego Community College District. In her classroom, you can see that on her wall, she posts these phrases to cite evidence. And this is a great way for them for students during a task, if they are writing, to be able to have these phrases at hand. And you can look at different phrases that are appropriate for the different levels you are teaching. We'll also be thinking about critical thinking, ways to address this in rigorous instruction. Again, as I mentioned, we're going to reflect on each of the 5 tasks I'm going to engage you in today, and we're going to think about both the academic language and critical thinking that was necessary to complete them. The last aspect that we are going to analyze will be ways to scaffold tasks. Many of these you already came up with your list. I wish I had been able to quickly print out the list as all of you were typing, but I saw a lot of these come up. Providing a model. Modeling as a class write. I like to do class writes when I know that I'm exposing students to this type of writing for the first time. If it's the first time I'm introducing students to a comparison, then I want to do a class write together first. And then I might even then take that down to the level of having students work in small groups and do a group write before I ask them to do it individually. Providing a lot of visual input. I saw a lot of you writing up graphic organizers as your scaffolds as well. In the English Language Proficiency Standards table C1 in the appendix, it's a great place for all the various scaffolds that we have in ESL, and we're looking and which ones relate to the English language proficiency standards by levels 1 through 5. So that will be something that we will be posting as well for you. Okay? So I want to tell you a story. We're going to get started with our first task here. I'm going to tell you the story about Sylvia and her love for education. This is a Costa Rican widow that I admire. She is sitting in the right-hand spot of that picture, and I'm actually sitting in the middle. This was before I started my career in ESL. When I was in college, I had the luck of the draw by being placed in her home for my semester abroad. She and my family share many values, and the one she shared with my mom was the saying, "Your inheritance is your education." It was her dream to ensure her dozen children received an education. Here she is. Bear that picture in mind as you get to read her story. Take a moment to read. The second download is actually the PowerPoint that I am using today. Oh, Veronica's already answered. Thank you, Veronica. What a great team. So looking at this reading, this is an activity that I call Same Gist, Different Words. I've written this at a higher level than I would for beginning low because of the audience I am addressing today. Now that you've read that story, I'm sure some of you were kind of shocked to read the first sentence of the second paragraph. I wanted to show you Sylvia's legacy, one of her legacies. That is 3 generations of her children celebrating her second son's 70th birthday. And here she is attending the graduation of her granddaughter, the first to receive her degree as a medical doctor in Sylvia's family. And here are the different words for this story. I'd like you to type in the general chat what differences you see between the first 2 paragraphs I showed you and these 2 paragraphs.
Mary Louise, while they're doing that, Diana wants to know what is the name of the person you are
Oh,
Googling.
yes, I'm going to write the name here in the chat for all of you. That would be Avril Coxhead, and it's the academic word list. Higher level vocabulary, okay. Longer sentences, 3 or more academic vocabulary. More specific, yes. More complex sentences, more descriptive as well. Multisyllabic words, yes. More details. Especially for those of you who are working in a multi-level class, you will have students that have different vocabulary and different experiences that they can bring to the classroom, more sophisticated vocabulary. What level is this supposed to be? This would be an intermediate level. It could be more confusing for students, certainly if they were low level. I wanted to finish the story just for you. I would tell the story just using the pictures before I would even get to the part where I would present my first story to them, because I'd want them to hear the story that I was narrating. They could even fill in a graphic organizer about what they were hearing. And then I'd like to conclude about the 3 students that were single when I lived in her home. Last week, Sylvia celebrated her 96th birthday. On the left, she is with her youngest son, who holds an MBA, and he is the administrator of the family business. In the center is her daughter, who is currently her caregiver, who left her career in teaching to be her caregiver. She has a Bachelor of Science and is a microbiologist. And the son on the right is a mechanical engineer and president of the family business. I love using stories to help connect with my students, and it's a way this would be part of any writing where they're trying to think about goal setting. This would be something that I would use in that unit. I would ask them to tell us what they see in the pictures and write their own story. Exactly, because that would be the connection for their goal setting. They can also think of someone who has been inspirational to them. So I'd like us now to analyze the task. ELP Standard 3 asks students to write about level appropriate topics. So level 1 and level 2, level 1 is what we would be considering our beginning levels, and level 2 would be what we would be considering between our high beginning, low intermediate levels. The academic language that was used in this exercise would be sequencing, critical thinking, recall elements of a story, make observation, describing cause and effect, using voice appropriate to the audience. The scaffolding that I would provide would be sentence frames and brainstorming synonyms. If I were working with a low level, I would take those first 2 paragraphs and I would highlight the words I would want to try to find synonyms for. Let's continue. In your handout, task 2 is a letter to self, and this is a way to connect your course syllabus with your students and their goals. They are going to fill out this letter to themselves. You are going to provide them with the academic words you're going to teach in your class. They're going to list their first language. And you can, in this 3rd paragraph of the letter, you are going to provide the student learning outcomes that the students will have at the end of your course. And then the student signs it. You collect these and you get stamps, and then you have the students, have them address their envelopes, and at the end of the semester you have the letter sent to the students. Hopefully not too many students move. So that is another task that we can use, because we're modeling through this task of letter to self. We're modeling goal setting. What are they going to study? And then we can keep referring to the academic words and also keep referring to the student learning outcomes through the goals that we place for the day on our board. And that way we keep recycling that with our students. We can also keep some of those academic words, help use those for exit tickets with our students. And also with the student learning outcomes, have them write in a journal or on an index card what I learned today. Many ways to keep them engaged, but also to think about what are they going to learn in this course. And for students who may not have finished the course, it's okay. They get their letter in the mail and they think, gosh, I need to go back and I need to sign up again for another class. Task number 3 is on page 2 of your handout. How do you? This is referring to ELP Standard 3, well-structured event sequences. I'm going to give you some possible topics here. and then I'm going to have you work. These are some possible topics that one could use, and you can come up with others as well. But what I'd like you to do now, you're going to fill in the chat for 2 of those and think about what you would write. What would be the steps? What would be the brainstorming steps to register for classes or prepare for a job interview? How do you? You're going to select one of those processes that's listed there and write 1 or 2 of the scaffolds that you'd need to provide your students with. Okay, read the job description, so you'd probably be bringing that in. Search online. And when we're searching online, would we be providing some keywords for our students? Toshiko, visit the office. Would we also be asking them, maybe once they're visiting the office, to write down what they see in the office, who they would go to first? Talk about basic inventory. Okay, great. You've come up with lots of good scaffolding. And as I mentioned before, anything that's written in the chat pod, we will then also be able to send out to you after the webinar. So that way you can have these ideas to take away with you, and you can print that out, and along with the handout from today's session, you'll have some ideas to get you going this semester. Okay. Here are some possible teaching steps. Would this be appropriate for level 2 students? I think it would. You would need to look at the content. This is Janine. Janine? Yes, you would have to look at the content of your unit that you're using in that book, and then come up with how do you, and I believe there was something along those lines in that book. Okay, so here's some possible teaching steps. Pose your question to your students. Brainstorm everything they need to do and don't worry about the order. Then you can order the steps. Have the students work in pairs or small groups to order those steps. Come together, and then you can work with a graphic organizer like I presented you with. Follow the same process with a new topic. This time the students can work in small groups. They can post what they wrote, and then you can have a gallery walk of all of these processes and provide students with post-it notes so they can ask questions. And that would be part of the feedback. Then the students would continue to go back to their groups and see, did we miss a step? Were we not clear in our instructions? Someone says, I think you could do it with how to use the ATM. Yes, exactly. And so this is also a topic that can work at any level, just based on your level of proficiency with your students, and you would adjust the vocabulary accordingly and the scaffolds as well. So let's look at the analysis. It's ELP Standard 3, writing about level appropriate topics again. With support, they can communicate information and feelings about text and experiences. And for academic language, they're working on sequencing, critical thinking, They're making these observations, cause and effect, what might come first, what will come second. And they will also use a voice that's appropriate to audience. Who are they writing this for? Are they writing how do you register for class for another student? It might be a little more familiar. If they're writing how do you apply for this job, it might be a little more formal. And various scaffolds that you suggested as well are listed here in my list. Okay, let's move on to the next task. This one is same meaning, different audience. And some of these tasks I like doing because you can do them in the classroom and you don't necessarily, especially with this one, need to collect the exercise from the students to correct them. This is building writing fluency. A lot of times, especially because we get so used to communicating in a different medium, it's interesting when you talk to teenagers. Not too many teenagers are emailing these days, are they? Some of them aren't even communicating as much by text message. Maybe it's more tweet or Instagram. Many different ways of communication. But if you get used to one way of communication, does that way of communication translate to another form, like an email? There was a friend of mine who taught in an intensive English program in Arizona, and she received an email from a student who signed it, "Love ya lots." And she said, you know, it's a good thing you're in the ESL environment here so that I can share with you that this would be something that the student was living in the dormitory. Well, this would how you'd be communicating with other friends in the dorm, but not to your professor. Okay. We are going to work on this activity now, and I am going to have you write some examples. You can choose one of them. So you can decide which one you want to answer. How are you going to communicate that that you're sick and you're going to tell either a friend, the child's teacher, or your boss? Blanca, that's okay. I have never tweeted either. Oh, as soon as we get an example, it looks like a couple people are typing in examples for the tweet. And they changed. It used to be 144 characters, and now it's more. I believe it's double that amount. Thank you, Gail. So using abbreviations could occur in that tweet. Oh, okay. Patricia said hers should have gone to email. That's okay. Ah, okay. I see which one you mean. So let's look at our tweet. Very short and other styles in it. I am too old to tweet. Okay. You sick. Okay. Hashtag absent today. Okay. So things that are going to be very, very familiar. Now in our text message, one of you just wrote, you'd have an emoji. But the emails are going to be more formal. I didn't complete my email there. But also our tone. What sort of vocabulary are we using? What tone are we communicating? Okay, and here's one for about that a mother would write about their son was too sick to go into school. Excellent. So you'd be using more formal language, a more casual tone for the text, and very, very casual for the tweet as well. So if we think about the various registers, formal and informal, and some characteristics of those, just a difference that students can make in writing if they're writing an email to a supervisor, the use of contractions. Oh, interesting. The last comment that's been posted here, have noticed that older colleagues use a more formal tone with email, while younger colleagues use a more informal style. And then also teaching students our abbreviations, because many times too, we need to educate our students of what they're going to be exposed to by other colleagues, and other colleagues who are native speakers of the language may be using these abbreviations. So we just want to make sure that our students are aware and can make the distinction of which context and who they should use formal and informal registers with. I have an apology here. I did not make a change on my title of this slide. It should say different message. Okay. Adapting language choice to purpose. We need to make sure that our students know who they're writing for and the differences between those audiences. Academic language. Inform via a policy for work, for example. What does that policy say? Critical thinking, using the voice that's appropriate for that audience, and scaffolding, again, a brainstorm chart for the same gist. Did you have an opportunity to read? And if you didn't, I'm going to give you a moment to skim the article that I provided you from Newsela. Another opportunity for you to raise your hands. How many of you use Newsela to get articles to use with your students? Okay, about a fifth of you have. Have others of you heard of it and not tried it yet? It's a great resource because it allows you to change the level of a reading, but the readings have been selected for their nature, that they are academic readings. So the one I have here is based on the main character of one of these movies that came out recently. And now, for the life of me, I can't remember the name of the movie. You can type it in the left if you do remember. Hidden Figures. That is the name of the movie. So Katherine Johnson, who can type in what was her goal? What was Catherine's goal? Promotion? And notice that I have a text-dependent question here as well. I say, according to the reading, what was her goal? Research mathematician. Yes, this article and the word count that I have here in the level, this level is high intermediate to advanced. I didn't want to go with the lower level because I wanted to make it interesting for the group that I was addressing today. So, how did Professor Clater motivate Catherine? Did anyone answer that question? That's okay. We're going to go ahead and we will look at how this reading will allow us to get to writing tasks. She was very encouraging to her, yes. Thank you, Blanca. So we can come up with her timeline. And we can do this with any biography that we take off. I believe the key word I had put into Newsella was biographies. Then I think you'll see where I'm going with this by providing my timeline for you. And then, did we have any similarities? Well, we both liked math. My parents were highly disappointed that I did not decide to major in math when I went to college. What? You're so good at it, they said. We were both teachers, but clearly Catherine had an impact on our future with her work through NASA. My impact has been at a different level through my work in ESL. So then in our Venn diagram, that would be another way of looking at it, using a different graphic organizer. And what did we have that was similar? So we would be preparing our students here to write two different pieces. They would be doing compare contrast, or they could just be writing the biography, the timeline of what they read. This refers to ELP Standard 4. The critical thinking skills are listed here: compare, draw conclusions, cite evidence for comparison and contrast, and again, our scaffold, great use of graphic organizers. So for our reflection, I would like you to fill in which best practices you use. So go ahead and select the ones you currently are using. And after we complete the poll, you'll see why I'm having you work on this poll, because it's leading us into our final stages of the presentation today. I haven't seen anyone select use writing in exit tickets. Oh, you could only make one selection. I am sorry. Okay. I did not set that up properly. Okay. Then that explains why some people only had certain ones selected. Okay. Ah, okay. You don't use exit tickets because they leave at different times. Well, one could be a written exit ticket that they get um, index card and they have to write on it what they learned that day or how that particular goal that you have written or objective for today's class, how that was met, what they learned for it. Okay, I am going to move on now, and I am going to go into our last, your commitment. And you have your commitment also on your handout on page 5, your commitment to increase rigorous writing tasks in your classroom. And you can add them in here if you'd like to. 3 tasks or strategies you experienced today that you could implement. 2 tasks you plan to do next week or next month. And something you would like to learn more about. And I have someone who wrote down to learn more about pre-literate students. Yes, and I should have said that up front, that everything we were working on today, I didn't read my note to self at the beginning, which was that today's webinar was focusing on from beginning low to through low intermediate. And some of those tasks that I demonstrated today also were tasks that were at a higher level because of you as an audience. I'm going to forward the slides here and keep those chat pods open for you to continue there. We are grateful for you taking this time out of your day today and to collaborate with each other as well through your participation in the chat and by raising your hands and staying engaged today. The resources are on the last page of the PowerPoint, which you can download. They'll be able to download those resources, correct, Veronica? We will put those back up for you. And then you will be able to also complete the evaluation. We have 1 minute until 2 p.m. Oh, I see a comment that Toshiko made, and I actually had a note about that, that students don't want to write in a hurry. A lot of times in my classes, I realized I needed to be giving more time to the actual drafting process in class because many times I would dedicate so much time to pre-writing and revision in class, and the actual drafting I would be assigning for homework, and that just never proved to be very successful. Thank you, everyone, and have a great rest of your afternoon.
Thank you, Mary Louise, and thank you all for participating in today's webinar. I have posted the URL of where the webinar recording and other handouts will be available to you later on this afternoon. So please be sure to check out that page on the professional development side of the educators page. In addition, please share these resources with other colleagues. We will not host any webinars next week, but on October 10th, we will have a webinar titled Andragogy for the 21st Century. So please be sure to register for this webinar and other webinars that are coming up. Here's the URL to register. And I will close the webinar right now. And when I do close it, the evaluation will appear on your screen. So please be sure to take about 2 to 3 minutes to let Mary Louise know what you thought about today's webinar, if there are any areas of improvement, and if there are other professional development or technical assistance needs that you have at this time. Thank you all very much for your participation, and I hope you all have a great evening. Thank you.